Okay. Yeah, really important to respect other people's perspectives. But particularly if you're on, say, a not-for-profit board, you might have a variety of people with different backgrounds, different levels of expertise. Maybe you might have an accountant and a lawyer, or a community person, depending on what type of board you're on. Everyone has a different perspective and a different level of expertise about, their area of expertise. So it's really important for you to kind of pipe up and contribute that in a meeting, because people really value the perspectives of other people, and if you don't have that experience, you often don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how to ask the right questions. So if that's an area of expertise, if the topic is your area of expertise, then by all means, pipe up and contribute your perspective. Uh, Even if a decision is not a consensus, maybe it is a majority decision and that you might not necessarily agree with it. I think it's important that you kind of accept and move on if a final decision is made, and that you keep that discussion confidential. You don't really want to be going off and behind people's backs kind of saying, "Oh, I didn't agree with that decision." I think it's really important as a chair that if you feel like there are people who strongly disagree, that you're better off not making a decision and coming back to the next meeting, and in between trying to have a conversation to understand why people might have the view that they do, and seeing if you can come up with potential compromise so that everyone can be in agreement. All right, so we're going to move on to section 2, which is about preparing for the meeting, and then decision making during the meeting, and then record keeping with minutes. And this is probably the area that most people were most interested in the survey. So we might, if we can, have a bit of a conversation about some of the key issues. So first of all, agendas. They're quite important that you have an agenda beforehand. It could just be dot points. It doesn't have to be a formal agenda, but it's good to be clear about kind of what you want to cover in each meeting. So it's useful to group items according to their purpose. So you might have items where you expect there will be a lot of discussion. And then there are items where you need to make a decision. So, for example, I'm on a housing provider, community housing provider board, and so we have a lot of decisions that we have to make about purchasing of land and building houses. So there's usually a lot of items on our agenda for decision around that topic. Then you might have items that are more about for information or for noting. Now, they're not generally items you need to necessarily have a conversation about. So it's worth kind of having those towards the end of the agenda so that you don't get bogged down in people asking a whole heap of questions about documents that really are just for noting or for information. You might want to focus the beginning of the meeting on any items that need fresh ideas or are urgent or important or will generate discussion, so that you're doing those early in the meeting rather than leaving it to the end when everyone's tired and grumpy. And it's also important to not forget those items which are important but not necessarily urgent. And so they might be often the items that people kind of go, oh, we never got around to that. It's, something that we always dealing with the urgent items and have forgotten about some of the important but not urgent items. So I'll give you some tips in a minute about how you can potentially remember those to include those. As I mentioned, I think a good meeting goes no longer than 2 hours. If you can do it in an hour, that's even better. Um, and it's useful to maybe as a chair to be thinking about how much time might I need for each item and having a bit of a running sheet around, well, I'm gonna have this item done by, we're going to start at 5 and then I want this item done by 6 so that we can finish by 6:15. Uh, but you also need to have that flexibility to kind of run with things if there's a lot of discussion. But it's useful to just have that in the back of your mind around roughly how much time you might want to spend on each item. So here is an example of a fairly, generic agenda. Hopefully you can see that, but I'll read it out if it's too small. So we've got our welcome and apologies, who's in attendance. We've got our declaration of any conflict of interest for that meeting, and then confirmation of the previous minutes and any action items that need to be covered and where they're up to. If you have done any out of session or circular resolutions prior to this meeting, then you might want to include those so that they're kind of recorded in the minutes of this meeting. Then there's a section there around reports. It could be if you're an organisation that has paid staff, like a CEO, the CEO might give a report. If not, then the chair might give a report, or you might have a report from the treasurer, or the secretary might give a report about correspondence that's been received in the since the last meeting. You might put those at that spot, or you might want to put those towards the end. It's up to you. It depends on, how much conversation those reports might generate. And then grouping your matters for decision, your matters for discussion, and your matters for noting. Any other business, and then what the proposed date might be for the next meeting, and what kind of actions and decisions that you have from that meeting. Useful to identify who might be leading that particular item. So you might have a column there identifying who's leading the agenda item, whether there is a paper attached, whether there's a financial report that you need to have a look at. And then the chair might also have another column with the amount of time that they think that they need to allocate to each one. Is that the kind of agenda that you commonly kind of see in your meetings? I can see some head nods, so that's good. Anyone have a different format for their agendas? Oh, Janet, thank you for the thumbs up. No, all very so let's just have a bit of a pause, and hopefully your brain is not melting at this point. Certainly there are some meetings that I've sat in where it's like, please end this meeting. It's doing my head in. So we try not to have too many of those types of meetings. Okay, meeting papers. Now, this might be more relevant if you're on a larger kind of, or, small kind of not-for-profit that has staff, if you're, on a sporting, club. I used to be on the governing committee of our local hockey club. We certainly didn't have a great deal of papers. So, it does vary depending on the organisation that you're on. But, if you do have meeting papers, then that can be a really good source of supporting information for the agenda item. And it means that you don't need to have extensive minutes. If you can say in your minutes, there was a paper, and you don't need to kind of replicate what's in the paper. A good meeting paper will have recommendations in it. It might have options as well, depending on the type of meeting paper. It's really important to kind of be clear on the purpose of, what you're trying to achieve, what you want the board or committee to do, what decision do you want them to make. And as I mentioned, it's useful having some options if there is a need to think about potential options. There's not like an obvious way forward. It enables discussion if there are some options included there. And it's useful to kind of summarize or have some summary around the advantages and disadvantages or the risks. If you've got any legal advice in relation to the topic, then to summarize that or include that as an attachment. Or if there's any research or data that you might have. So, for example, you might be having a conversation about membership fees. So you might have some research or data to support the recommendations that you want to increase your membership fees, for example. And yeah, I think no more than 1 or 2 pages. You can always add extra attachments if you need to, but I'm on several boards, and there are some boards that have a lot of papers to read, and it can be quite time consuming. So the shorter the better, I think. How many people have meeting papers as part of their meetings? Yeah, a couple. Do you find they're good, or they're bad, or they are, lengthy? Any views about how you think that they could improve? Sally, would you like to jump in?
Sorry. So yeah, Paco, that's what I like. It's from the company Institute of Company Directors, and I think it's a good little framework of writing reports. So purpose, audience, context, key messages, and what's the outcome you're hoping for.
Great. Thanks for that. Charmaine, you had your hand up. Any thoughts from you?
No, our meeting papers are always reviewed by the chair and the CEO. So they're very straightforward, very precise, and really just cut out any of the fat that they don't think is necessary, which is really good.
Right.
So it keeps everybody kind of not as, I guess, focused.
Focused. Yeah. Yeah, good. Great. I want to be on your board. All right. Oh, I had one more thing there. Useful to send them out 1 week before. The last thing you want to do is have papers the day before the meeting, and you kind of have to, go through a lot of papers in a really short time frame. So, yeah, if they can be sent out a week before, or, if your meeting's on a Monday, at least on the Friday, so that you've got some, the weekend to have a read of them. Uh, okay. Now, I have another Slido question, but I'm not sure that that's quite working. Is that working? Yeah. So we've got, how does your committee board currently make decisions? If you can vote on that, we have 4 options. You can select one. And I guess go with kind of, what's the most common. All right. We've got a few people answering all of those. The majority look like, oh, no, we're neck and neck now. So we've got two that are the most common. The first is that you talk at length and you decide on a motion seconded by someone, and then you finally take a vote. And then the other common one is we have a short discussion and generally reach agreement quickly. So that's great. But there are a couple there who have strong debate with opposing views and you can't reach agreement. So yes, I can feel for you there, and we'll be talking about some tips on dealing with that. And likewise, some of you get off topic and you start discussing something completely different. Again, not an uncommon thing. So what I'd like to have a chat about.
I'll just
yes.
jump in there, Natasha. Did you
Yep.
see Janet said she does options 1 and 2 and John does all 4 of them?
Okay. Yes, well, that's not surprising. You can have all of those. All right. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for that. We'll be talking a bit about decision making. So it sounds like, a fair number of you have the process of having a motion, having someone move the motion, having someone second the motion, and then taking kind of a vote. Now, that is something that is quite common in parliamentary procedures. So like if you're on local government, then that is something that would happen quite a lot in those type of environments. But one of the things that you might not be aware of is you don't actually have to do that for every meeting, for every committee meeting. You might need to do it for your AGM, especially if that there's references to that in your governing rules. But you might be surprised to know that you actually don't have to do that approach in your everyday committee meetings. You can actually do a more informal approach. So in terms of decision making in your meetings, it is really important that the discussion canvasses a variety of perspectives, both positive and negative. And I think it's useful that you try and draw out that in your conversation, whether you're a chair or not. I think it's useful to be encouraging different perspectives. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. So he has, a black hat, which is kind of thinking about the negative. He has a green hat, which is thinking about the creative side. There's a blue hat, which is thinking about the processes. there are a couple of other hats. There are 6 in total. They're different colors and they represent a different perspective. It's useful to be sometimes thinking about that and going, am I going into my comfort zone of focusing on process because that's what I'm good at? Do I need to just think outside the square and maybe be a bit creative? Or am I very much someone who likes to focus on the negative? Am I always wearing the black hat and being negative? Can I sometimes just flip that out and go, okay, I'm going to wear a green hat today, and I'm going to try and be positive and creative. So that could be a useful technique for you if you feel like you're kind of always being one particular type. Or if you feel like your meeting as a whole is constantly kind of not being looking at a variety of different perspectives. It's worth thinking about both your own personal and other people's personal in the meeting, their values and assumptions, but also your organisation's values. If you're on the board of a not-for-profit, that not-for-profit will have objectives and might even have values as an organisation. At a minimum, they would have some objectives listed in their governing rules around kind of what their purpose is. It's useful to remind yourself of that when you're making a decision, and if you're kind of feeling like you're straying off as a committee into broader issues, to maybe refocus and go, what's our core mission here as an organisation? We need to focus on that. Yep, I've mentioned the governing rules as potentially might require you to make decisions in a certain way. And I think you really, for a general meeting of your committee, you don't really need to be having formal motions and seconding and voting. You can just have a discussion, and I encourage you as a committee to try and reach consensus and agreement without having to kind of formally vote on something. If you feel that you're not going to reach consensus and you do have to kind of take a vote to make a decision, maybe it's worth not necessarily making the decision at that meeting. It might depend on how urgent it is. But maybe it's worth saying, let's hold this over to the next meeting. We will get further information to address the perspectives of the people who might be against the proposal, and bringing it back to the next meeting. And then you might be able to respond to their particular issues to the point where they might agree to it. And I think that's a better approach than having people potentially disgruntled and unhappy about a decision that is a majority decision that they don't agree with.
Can I just ask, Natasha, how do you manage, obviously a lot of us are on small committees in a small community, and so people get very passionate about things that are very close to their heart and their community. How do they, you have to manage that, manage that so there's not sort of back chatting and talking behind the scenes. You mentioned it before, that it's best not to have outside discussions, but that's just virtually impossible in a small community because everyone talks about what's happening.
Yeah,
and it sometimes can get a bit toxic.
Well, look, I do think it is worth maybe setting some ground rules as a committee and having that conversation as a committee about having everyone agree to those ground rules and identifying what those ground rules are. And if you can do it in a way where you're not imposing that on everyone, but everyone kind of suggests their own ground rules and and agrees to them, then, that could be where you say, look, this is, we're all on the committee. We need to be making a decision. We understand that whatever decision we make might have ramifications for, people beyond the committee, our membership, or the community at large. And can we all agree that, we can be as passionate as we like in here, but let's not kind of try and undermine the rest of the committee when we leave the room and talk to other people. I think, you just have to try and set those parameters and boundaries.
So does that start with the chair setting that, sort of initiating that idea and then getting everybody on board to become empowered with?
Yeah, yep, that's right. Or if you're not a chair, having a conversation with the chair and saying, look, I've noticed this. What do you think about us, at our next strategy planning day, or at our next meeting, that we actually, have a discussion about this, and we set some ground rules. Okay. So some tips for chairs. I think it's important for you, the chair, to follow the agenda and keep the meeting moving along, gently guiding back to the agenda if the discussions start getting off track. Facilitating but not commanding, enabling others to speak first, encouraging the group as a whole to do the work, rather than I know I've been in small volunteer organizations where the chair does all the work, and it's not kind of evenly distributed amongst the rest of the committee. So I think it's really good for chairs to try and encourage other members of the committee to get involved, so that it doesn't all fall on the chair. I've talked a lot throughout this about achieving consensus, which isn't always possible. But, I think if you can, it makes for, better harmony amongst the group. But you have to also be careful to avoid groupthink. And so if you feel like your meetings, I mean, I've been in meetings where I feel like as chair, I'm whipping through the agenda. There's not a lot of conversation. Everyone's just going, yep, yep, yep. And so I kind of say to myself, maybe I need to ask some pointed questions and elicit further information, because I don't want us to fall into the trap of kind of, we all agree without having some rigorous debate about important issues. I mean, obviously you don't want rigorous debate about some administrative matter that's not important, but if it's something important, I think it's good to be encouraging alternative views. Very important for the chair to be impartial and not to be seen to be favouring particular people. I mean, I know, when we're in small country communities, we know everyone. You might be friends with some people on the committee and not necessarily friends with others. It's really important as chair to make sure that you're objective and impartial, and you're not favouring your friends over the people who are, not your friends. So really important to be respectful and neutral, and monitoring the emotional pulse of the meeting. If you feel like things are starting to get heated, maybe it's worth just saying, hey, let's just have a quick 5-minute toilet break, just to sort of try and dissipate some of that emotion, or ending the meeting if you feel like things are getting really heated, and saying, okay, we need to stop this. We need to kind of have a bit of a break and let's reconvene next week or whatever. Encouraging everyone to speak. And I think it's important to encourage people to speak once and let everyone have a turn before others speak again. I think it's, I've been in meetings where you have people dominate. They might say something, then someone else will say something, then they say something again. I think it's useful to have, I mentioned the ground rules, around a ground rule that says, well, everyone speaks once and then they get a second chance, so that everyone gets an opportunity to say what they think. And then it's really important at the end to summarize the discussion and be very clear on the decision and the action so that everyone understands, yes, I'm agreeing to this and this is what the action is. And that's really useful for the minute taker as well. So I think that there's probably some people who attend meetings with their friends and you have a good old chin wag around a bunch of stuff. Might not actually be a focused meeting. So let's make sure that in a meeting that's about a governing of an organisation, that it's focused and productive. Okay, so some common problems that I'm sure you have encountered at some point. I know I have. There might be long-standing or extroverted members who dominate the discussion. There's one or two who always speak up and always have an opinion, and then no one else participates. Maybe there is death by monologue where you have very long, boring reports and people just drone on and you're really struggling to keep awake, and the meeting goes over time. Or maybe you're a bunch of great friends, you catch up on all the gossip, you have a great deal of fun, but you don't actually get anything done. Not a great deal of decisions or actions get made. Or maybe you attend the meeting, but there's no agenda. You don't really know what you're going to be discussing. You can't prepare beforehand, and you're just making it up as you go along. Or maybe at the end of the meeting, you've got 100 actions, 100 decisions, 100 actions, and you'll go away feeling overwhelmed with the amount of work because you don't have any paid staff to do it. All the committee members are the people who do the work, and you kind of have too much to do and no one to do it. I've certainly been in that boat as well. Or maybe your legal and financial record keeping and reporting obligations are not being discussed. You're not having an agenda that includes those. Anyone, do those resonate with anyone? I mean, I know that we don't want to kind of, you might know each other and you might not want to necessarily volunteer that there's situations that resonate with you, but maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I'd be interested in your views about, I've got my own thoughts about how we can fix some of these problems, but I'd be interested in your views on how you might fix these. So let's go to the first one, dominated by one or two. Anyone have any thoughts about how you might deal with that particular problem?
Well, I made a suggestion in the chat that sometimes if you do the old-fashioned everyone speaks one at a time around the table, it allows everyone to be heard and they feel like they've been heard, and then it's easier to move on quickly.
Yep. Anyone else have any ideas?
really it's just completely controlled by the chairman, isn't it?
Well, certainly the chair has a strong role, but if you're not the chair and you're getting frustrated about this, I think that any committee member can pipe up and say, well, I haven't heard from Mary. Mary, what's your view about this? I think it's okay if you feel that there are people who are not participating, for you to ask them a question. Don't You don't have to rely on the chair doing it.
Yeah, sometimes it's the chair that dominates the meetings.
Yeah.
So we have a CEO that kind of makes sure that everybody gets a say, or because sometimes the chair has a very strong opinion on one thing and forgets that there's other people in the room. But yeah, so we have a CEO that kind of sees who wants to have a, because you can see when someone wants to say something but then kind of recalls it, just they're not sure, because there's obviously extroverted people and we have introverts and our
Yes.
board as well, so
Yep.
yeah, it's good to just have that outside perspective, I think, maybe.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree. And I strongly encourage chairs to not be opinionated. I'm a chair and I have my own opinions. And it's certainly when I moved from being on the board to becoming the chair, I was quite conscious of kind of not feeling like I was able to express my opinions. But I think it's okay to express an opinion, but to wait to the end, to wait till other people have had a chance to talk. So yeah, I think it's really good practice for a chair to not dominate. All right, let's move on to death by monologue, the long, boring reports. Anyone have any ideas about how you can fix that particular problem?
That's why I'm here.
That's your problem, is it?
Perhaps be very specific against each agenda item to say how long you'll have to discuss it.
Yes.
And even
maybe
get down to how long each person's allowed to discuss it.
Yes. Janet, were you going
maybe
to
if
say
I
something?
offer a suggestion, maybe death by monologue, particularly the long, boring reports. If the report is written, you can say maximum length is 1 page or something like that. But we still do have some people who just carry on rabbiting on, and I'm merely a committee member, not even secretary, whatever, not on the executive, just a committee member. And I'm thinking, how can I diplomatically say, can we get back to the topic we're discussing, please? I haven't found a good diplomatic way of saying that yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe an opportunity is for you to have a coffee with the chair and kind of suggest that maybe they could jump in a bit more frequently to cut people off in a very, respectful way. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion here?
Yes.
I think often people want to tell everyone how hard they're working and what a wonderful job they're doing. If people present a report written and people can just read it at their own leisure and then only raise items that actually specifically need discussion for if they need to make a decision on something, rather than just do a long-winded report on everything they've done.
Yeah. Look, I think if the report is written, then it's almost like you don't need a verbal update. It's like, okay, I accept your report, move on. So that could be a way to cut people off, saying, put it in writing, and then we won't need to kind of talk about it. I'm mindful.
Natasha, Carey's got her hand up.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say, is it okay to have all your reports emailed out with the agenda and then just a brief summary to be covered in the report?
Absolutely. Yep.
So then that cuts out a lot of the time.
Yep.
Is that a common thing that's done?
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Send out the papers, the reports with the agenda, and then just say, you know, we accept the paper. We understand that you've read the paper. We're not going to repeat what's in the paper. So, let's, unless you have, a particular question, let's move on. So that could be a way to cut it back. Now, look, I've just noticed the time and we've got 5 more minutes and I've got a few other things I wanted to cover off. So I might just, are people okay if we go just a little bit longer? I apologize for that. But I did have some suggestions, which, you have kind of covered, specifically asking the quiet members a question, setting time limits for each item. Likewise with the great friends but no action, setting a time limit for the catch up. The meeting begins, we've got 5 minutes to talk, and now we're down to business and we're going to be focused on the agenda. For those that don't have an agenda, maybe start having an agenda. As I said, it can just be a few dot points, but starting with having an agenda and sending it around beforehand. If you have too many actions, maybe at the end of the meeting, prioritizing them so that you get agreement from people as to which ones you'll focus on. And for reporting, have a compliance calendar. And I'm going to go into that. I've got some tips for a difficult meeting. That was something that I think some of you are suggesting could be an issue for you. So my tips on what you think might be, preparing beforehand for a difficult meeting, thinking beforehand about what you want to achieve, what would be an achievable goal for your meeting. Thinking about maybe having some pre-meeting conversations with individuals so that you understand their perspective and where they might be coming from before the meeting. Reflecting on both your own and other people's mindsets in relation to the issue, and thinking about what language you might use, how you might frame things so that they're not inflammatory or might set people off in a negative way. Start by acknowledging at the beginning of the meeting that it might be a difficult meeting, that some people will have strong views about something, that they might have strongly divergent views, and acknowledging that at the beginning, and just reinforcing if you have any values or code of conduct or kind of mission or elements that will ground people around how they might behave in the meeting, and reinforcing that. Getting agreement at the beginning that everyone will be respectful, professional, and try not to have too many strong emotions. Ensuring that everyone gets to have a say, but only one person speaks at a time. So that comes back to the sort of ground rules that you might want to set at the beginning of the meeting. And call a break or stop the meeting and reconvene at another time if you need to, or if you need to get a professional mediator. Some organizations have conflict resolution or dispute resolution built into their governing rules. If that's the case, that might identify the procedures that you need to follow if there is actually, a formal dispute resolution that you need to do. I think it's important that, you follow the rules of natural justice, which is that, everyone has the right to be heard, that they have the right to be treated without bias, and decisions will be based on relevant evidence. First step is for everyone to meet and try and resolve the issue. But if you can't get resolution, then you might need to involve a mediator. In the first instance, that could just be another member of your organisation, so long as it's agreed by all the parties. But if you find that that's not in agreement, you can get an external mediator, and then finally you might go to court over the action. Hopefully you don't get to that point. Hopefully you can resolve things sooner than that. I did want to cover off crisis management. We've all gone through the pandemic. I'm sure that you have also been involved in other situations with drought or bushfires or floods where, you might need to manage a particular crisis as a governing committee. So I think it's worth acknowledging that stress can change the way people behave, and kind of being aware of that, and showing some empathy and kindness around that. Some people can have volatile emotions, or they could feel overwhelmed, or they could kind of start micromanaging in a crisis. So people can change the way they behave in a crisis. So it's worth kind of thinking about that. Some tips to keep focused on your core values and what are the highest priorities for your organisation. Maybe having more frequent but shorter meetings, really focused on, what the crisis is that you are dealing with, or enabling a working group to be set up so that the whole board or committee don't need to meet, but a smaller number can meet more frequently to resolve the crisis, or you delegate more to the chair. Checking in with each other, not necessarily blaming people, focusing on, particularly if, let's say it's a bad media, you've got, something has happened. Don't blame people, just say it's happened. Let's focus on moving forward and fixing it. And checking in with people, prioritising their well-being and health and safety. Having frequent and open communication, particularly if you're a member-based organisation, I think it's really important that you communicate frequently with your members. If there's a crisis that you're managing as a board, in my experience, you can never over-communicate. If you get to the point where people are saying, please don't send me another email about this, then you probably have hit the mark. And it's pretty rare that someone's going to say that, I reckon. And look, if you need external help, just think about finding, if you've got some bad media, maybe you need to engage a PR company for a little bit just to help you manage the crisis. I won't go too much into minutes, but there's some tips. I think the key point that I wanted to say about minutes is they don't have to be lengthy. They really just have to summarise the key issue. They really only need to identify items that had discussion. They can be dot points. You can have things like the board discussed the issue in depth. They covered the key risks, advantages and disadvantages, and resolved that the decision was X. That's really all you need to say. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. If you do have a vote, then you probably need to say that in the minutes that, a vote was taken and the majority agreed. Or if it's consensus, you can just say the board resolved to approve the recommendation. So you don't need to go into a lot of detail. But hopefully they are accurate and not fictionalized for dramatic purposes. Quickly, I'll go into some of the sort of best practice elements that you could be thinking about. And having a compliance calendar is a good way to make sure that you're actually ticking off on all your responsibilities. So that's where you kind of plan for 12 months in advance. What are the key things that you're going to cover in each meeting? So it could be audit and financial reporting and budgets. It could be strategic topics. It could be review of policies. It could be when your AGM or planning days will be. And it might also look at recruitment, particularly like succession planning of board members whose terms are about to expire, and you need to re-elect new members or evaluate the performance of your board. So here's a bit of an example. It doesn't have to be lengthy. It can just identify in dot point form what are the key things that you're going to cover each board meeting. So here's this particular example, the board meets, it doesn't even meet monthly, like it says in July and August, there's no board meeting, but it does still identify some items that they're going to do each month. So that's just an example of what a board calendar can look like. It's also good for new members to have some form of induction. It doesn't, again, have to be a detailed, manual. It could just be a coffee with the chair. But I think it is important that the new members do have some form of induction that gives them key documents, whether that's electronic links or whether it's, here's a hard copy of important documents that they might need, that they have a chat with the CEO or the chair to get an overview of the organisation, maybe what the expectations are, what kind of culture the board has, and the organisation, provide that context. One thing you could think about is having a buddy system where a new board member or committee member has a buddy of someone who's been on the committee for a few years, for the first sort of 6 to 12 months as a opportunity for them to ask questions outside of the meeting with their buddy. Excuse me. Board evaluation is a useful tool to improve how you run your board meetings. You could do it as an anonymous survey. You could just have a coffee, like if you're a chair, you could just have a coffee once a year with all of your board members on a rotating basis, just to have a chat about suggestions for improvement. There are kind of, expensive board portal software that kind of can run professional board evaluations. You don't need to do that, but I think it is useful to regularly reflect as a board about how you run your meetings and are the topics kind of the topics that are most important. So things like the length of the meeting, what topics are included in the agenda, how the chair and the board members interact. You could consider having a board charter or a code of conduct for board members that spells out how you behave and your expectations around how many meetings you attend, and if you don't attend meetings, that you might be removed from the board. So you could think about that. Annual discussion by chair with committee. I'm not sure what I mean by that. I think that's a bit of a reflection back, and you have the conversation sort of as a committee as a whole. Any evaluation that comes, any issues that come out of an evaluation. And I guess reflecting on your own performance and being open to constructive feedback also helps. In-camera sessions is something that is used sometimes. What I mean by in-camera is where you have just the board without any paid staff or observers. If you have an external minute taker, they're not in attendance either. They tend to be used in the sort of larger organisations that have paid staff, where it is just the board, and they might have a conversation about sensitive matters that you don't want other people to be involved in. So it could be the salary of the CEO or the performance of the CEO. It could be HR concerns, anything that's really sensitive, or maybe it's some legal issue that you want to discuss just as a board without all of the potential non-board members in attendance. You can also use that as a time to reflect on your performance as a board without having kind of the staff involved in that. And the in-camera sessions are not minuted because they are confidential, but you can have a board paper presented for those, particularly if it's about the salary of the chair, for example. You might have a remuneration committee present a paper as part of the in-camera session. While a lot of boards are having kind of a in-camera session as a standard item at the beginning or end of the meeting, I think it is useful to be careful to avoid overusing it and having conversations or making decisions with an appearance of secrecy. So use it sparingly, but it can be useful. Excuse me. So my key takeaways, I will maybe ask some questions before I give my key takeaways. Is there anything in the chat, Katie, that I haven't covered off?
No, we've had a few little conversations about some ideas and how to let everybody speak once. Maybe the buddy system would help newer members feel more empowered, but no questions per se.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything? I know I whipped through some of the stuff at the end, but is there anything that people really would like to ask a question about, or feel like you'd like a bit more of a conversation about? This is your chance to speak up if there's anything that you'd like to know about.
Perhaps if people have got questions after they've reflected, they can be in contact with us and see if we can help them directly.
Okay, I'll go back to sharing because I have one last Slido question, which is, what is one key takeaway from this seminar that you'll implement immediately? Hopefully you have one thing that maybe you might not implement it immediately, but what's one key takeaway? What's one thing that you have learnt that you weren't aware of today? Okay, we've already got a few things in there. The buddy system and having induction for new members. The 6 thinking hats. the minute-taking tips, focusing on the basics and doing them well, having a compliance calendar. Someone else thinks the induction is something that they'd like to do more of. Setting the ground rules, having a conversation about that. Another person likes the buddy system. More discussion and decision without voting. Setting boundaries about the culture and agreeing on ways of behaviour. Another person for the calendar. Encouraging everyone to speak. Great. Thank you so much for sharing your key takeaways. I really appreciate that. I guess my key takeaways. Preparation is key. I think having a clear purpose, clear agenda, and supporting papers, if that is something that you have the capability of doing with your board, is really the key to a good meeting. My second takeaway is you don't have to be overly formal, but you do have to abide by your constitution. So if your constitution kind of says something, then you do have to kind of abide by that, but you can change that if you want. It's a good idea to balance the voices throughout the meeting so you don't have the same people dominating. And if you feel like maybe you're one of those people that dominates, maybe be mindful of that and come up with some ways that you can participate without dominating. And my last key takeaway is that agenda and minutes don't have to be overly complicated. They can just be simple dot points, but it's really important that you have them because you really need to ensure that you're recording decisions and actions. All right, so some things to think about, to reflect on about your current meetings. Thinking about your meeting agenda, is it strategic or is it overly operational? Are you ensuring that you are covering some of those strategic thinking, planning items rather than just always focused on the day-to-day business? Thinking about how are you making decisions and who is participating in that decision, and can you get potentially a greater level of participation in that decision making? Which leads me to the next point about am I enabling everyone to have a voice? And I think you don't have to be chair to be encouraging other people to speak up. Feel free to say, well, what do you think, Mary? You're an expert in this area. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And lastly, are our minutes succinct? I think they don't need to identify who said what, and they don't need to be a blow-by-blow description of what happened. They can just simply summarise briefly the conversation, but particularly focus on the decision and any actions. So there's a number of resources that you can access, and when you get the PDF, you can click on the link there and it will take you to those. There's the Institute of Community Directors. They have some help sheets and tips on meeting procedures, as does the Australian Institute of Company Directors. They've got some templates and fact sheets. Some of them are available to anyone. Others are only available to members, but most of the ones around meeting procedures are available to anyone. The Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission, they have a guide on managing conflicts of interest. If that's something that you're not really sure about, take a look at their guide. And then lastly, the Governance Institute of Australia also has some best practice guides and fact sheets on meeting procedures. So take a look at those. bit of a reminder, we kind of have Christmas coming up and then, school holidays. So our next workshop on strategic planning made easy is not until the 17th of February. But we're going to be looking at strategic planning. And then the last workshop is about understanding financial reports, and that will be understanding financial reports from the perspective of someone who's not an accountant, which is me. So if you're not an accountant and you really would like to know about how to understand financial reports, then join me for that one on the 17th of March. Lastly, Katie would like you to complete a survey on this webinar, and I really apologise for going over time. But there's the QR code and the link. You can do it now or you can do it later, but please do it because it is something that the funders of this series of workshops would like as part of the evaluation.
I just noticed the link's not interactive, but I will send that out tonight or tomorrow morning with the presentation. So if you can have a moment, please, to fill that in tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Thank
Natasha.
you. Thank
Anything
you.
else?
I'm really sorry I went over time on such a boring topic about meetings. But thank you all for bearing with me, and I hope that it's given you some food for thought around how to improve your meetings in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Natasha, for your time, and thank you everyone for joining tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hopefully will see some of you in February.
Yes, have a good Christmas and hopefully see you in February.
Thanks. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.